As the party finishes their short rest, they take in their surroundings one more time. The immense cavernous space that they find themselves in, below the volcanic Delarada mountain range, still rages like an inferno. The party remains carefully behind the cover of nearby ruins of this ancient magical city buried here. Before them lies a massive lake of lava that has consumed all but the very rooftops of what remains of this city. Yet, a mile off in the distance, the massive citadel stands defiantly in the middle of this molten lake, warded against the elements, and guarded by the enchanted automaton defenses that patrol the rooftops. These automatons fire sabot-like projectiles at the party whenever they are visible, still following the orders given to them over half a millennium ago. Behind the cover of a toppled skyport, the party finishes repairing the 3 vehicles they've pulled from the rubble. These sleek machines that hover over the ground, fueled by magic, have just enough space to seat the entire party. So, with one final mustering of courage, the party all activate their vehicles. The etheric engines roar to life, buzzing in the air with arcana. In a flash, the adventurers all speed off one by one, skimming across the surface of the lava, on a direct course for the citadel. Magical sabot projectiles rain down from above. Small magical automaton drones travel in swarms, trying to latch on to the vehicles so they may siphon the magic from them. Fire elementals take notice of the movement and begin to close in. And a rumbling sound gets louder and louder as a gigantic red worm bursts through the lava ahead, causing a heavy tidal wave that sends molten rock and slag flying in the party's direction. But the adventurers race forward, dodging and weaving, casting spells, and doing everything they can to make it to the mighty citadel and the secrets held within.
So, what you just saw was a sort of narrative embellishment of a session that I had ran for my players that I was DMing for. Now, this scenario that I just described was not necessarily an encounter, and it wasn't really a skill check either. This was a new thing that I had made for that session because I had made these speeder-like vehicles. Our campaign setting is sort of a high fantasy sci-fi type setting. So I had made these speeder vehicles and I had printed out, stat blocks with like armor class and abilities and hit points. And I handed them out to the players. But I was like, well, what kind of a encounter or scenario do I want to run with these things? The scenario itself was a mile or so long stretch of lava that they had to cross in order to get to the citadel, the end of the dungeon. So making it a combat encounter to cross wasn't really necessarily within the realm of something I wanted to do, because then that would be very grindy and a bit of a slog and might take possibly 2 or 3 hours just to cross this area. And I didn't want to run a skill challenge because skill challenges are just very pass or fail. And it just didn't seem necessarily like it fit for what I was trying to do. So I made a new system for this, and I'm calling it a speed challenge. And it is very similar to a skill challenge. It's just tweaked a little bit and just thought of a little differently. So I'm going to try to go through these so-called speed challenges that I've made and sort of describe how you would go about making and running one. And I'll use the example that I had presented earlier, and we'll kind of go through that scenario so you can get a better idea of what a speed challenge is compared to something like a skill challenge. So for speed challenges, I keep track of them in rounds, and I will ahead of time create a table of challenges. So this is something that maybe sets it apart a little bit from a skill challenge, though you could do this with a skill challenge as well. But I will create a table ahead of time of, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to maybe 20 if I'm feeling, excited about it, skill challenges or challenges for them to do. And I will roll on these challenges at the start of every round. Now, these challenges can be anything. They can be an enemy, they can be an area of effect, they can be, just a certain event that happens. So for example, during the scenario that I presented earlier where they were driving these speeder bikes across this lava lake to get to the Citadel, some of the challenges that I was rolling on were things like a red worm bursts out of the lava, which is just a purple worm, but red. And when it did that, it wouldn't attack the group necessarily, because it was sort of just like looking for them. Really, it goes based off like tremor sense, and they're not really on the ground, so it's a little different, but essentially it's hunting them. And so it would, if they rolled a 1 on their challenges, or if I rolled the 1, sometimes I like to have the players roll it just because it's fun, it would burst out of the lava and it would go back down into the lava and create a splash of lava, molten rock, send it flying. And this would be sort of an AoE that the players would have to try and dodge out of, or take a bunch of damage from the flying molten rock. So that was one challenge that they faced. Another challenge was these little automaton drones that were flying around in swarms. And, if I rolled that one, then the players would pass through a swarm and the drones would try to latch on to their speeder bikes. And these things were trying to siphon the magical energy that powered these bikes. So if they did latch on, and I would actually have a different amount of them that latched on based on what the player rolled to try and evade them. So, if they roll like a 10, there's like a couple, but if they roll like, a 6, then, well, there's a bunch. If they roll maybe like a 15, then it's like, oh, there's not any, or maybe there's just one. But a certain amount of them would latch on, and then they would begin to drain the power out of these vehicles. So they would have to try to, if they did get them on their vehicle, then they would have to try to get them off. So that's some of the ideas for things you can put on these challenges. Is they're just something that threatens the players or is an obstacle to the players. And something I will note for these challenges is it's not a pass or fail type thing, and don't make it a pass or fail type thing. This is not a skill challenge. And in fact, Matt Koval has a good video about this very topic. I'll link that video somewhere. But Matt Koval talks about this aspect to his skill challenges, and I would say implement that same part here, where if they fail, just roll with it and create some new circumstance that they have to try and get out of because of the failure, right? So for example, when they're passing through these swarms of drones and, they fail and they get some of these drones on their vehicle that are starting to, ruin it, it's now a new challenge of trying to get these things off of their vehicle, because it's a problem, and if left for long enough, it could be a serious problem. But it's not its own individual challenge. I'm still going to be rolling for challenges while these things are latched onto their vehicles. It's just, if they fail something, you should roll with it and continue to sort of progress that failure and narrate how it happens, because at the end of the day, they're not meant to die during this skill challenge, this speed challenge. They're not meant to die. They're meant to get where they want to go. It's just what happens to them on the way there. This speed challenge is meant to be used in specifically scenarios where they need to get a short distance very quickly, and there's some sort of a ticking timer on it. And so it's like, what happens during that short jaunt? If it's dangerous, well, what's the danger? So that's what this is meant to simulate or express. So the speed challenge is in rounds, and you roll for a challenge at the top of every round, or you can do it at the top of every player's turn if you want it to be particularly dangerous, or if a lot of your challenges are meant to target individuals, that's another reason you might want to do it that way. But yeah, you can roll at the top of rounds or roll at the top of each player's turn, whichever. Also, something else to note about rolling for these challenges is if your party splits and has multiple groups going, you would roll at the top of the round for each group individually. So, because if one group is off going to like the right, say you have 6 players in your party and 3 of them go right and 3 of them go left, and they say they'll meet up at the other side. Well, rolling once and saying both parties that are far away from each other experience the effects of the roll seems, not as interesting as if you rolled for each one. So yeah, if your party splits up, roll for each one. But otherwise, you just roll once at the top of every round for the challenge. Also, another part of these speed challenges is keeping track of the distance or amount of ground they need to cover. So I would really only use these speed challenges in a scenario where you would have employed perhaps a skill challenge instead. So it's meant to simulate a quick time event, like short distance being covered, a ticking timer type thing. So because of that, you can track it like one of 2 ways for when the challenge is over. So maybe it's just they have to get through a certain number of rounds and then it's over. Or maybe it's they have to cover a certain amount of distance, in which case you would kind of keep track of the amount of movement that they're making. Maybe it's a 2,000 foot or so distance they have to cover. And so then you're keeping track of their movement every round and how far they're going. So another thing is to give your players some sort of sense of urgency during these speed challenges. Of course, it is a speed challenge, but what I mean by that is, for example, during the situation with the lava field, the reason my players had sort of a urgency to them and something that kept them moving forward was that there were automaton snipers on the top of the citadel that could reach as far as they were across the whole lava field. So the whole time they're traveling across this, they are being shot at and continuously being shot at by these things, which gave them a sense of urgency of we need to get across and spend as little time messing around with these challenges so that we can get across to the other side. So I would give your players something like that. And, it might come up naturally. So maybe you use this speed challenge in a situation where the players are seeing something happening in the distance that they know is time sensitive and they need to get there quickly. Maybe they're hunting down some wizard, and then they see that the wizard is off in the distance performing a ritual that they know needs to be stopped. So then in that case, they already have the urgency that they need to get there. You don't need to provide them something else. So I would try out using a speed challenge next time instead of a skill challenge when you have those scenarios where you want it to be dangerous, but it's also sort of a rapid fire thing. When you run these speed challenges, it feels very much like a skill challenge in that pacing of it, where it's just like one after another over and over and over, very cinematic, very quick. But it feels a bit more dangerous and a bit more chaotic when you throw in these challenges that are randomly rolled and are meant to sort of harm the players and sort of be continual problems for the players as they progress. And it's more about how do they make it there and what happens to them along the way and what resources do they have to expend, So, and you can even use speed challenges as a way just to see how long it takes them to get somewhere, right? And then, depending on how long it takes, maybe something has changed where they're trying to get to. So just try these out and see what you think. I'm sure there are people who have other solutions to this sort of thing of making a dangerous skill challenge that feels a bit more in-depth. I'm sure there are videos like that out there or resources like that out there, but this was just my solution to solving that. So let me know what you guys think about these speed challenges. So with all that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next video.